You have a pentagram on your cuff. Look at that.
My assistant here.
Wow.
Pointing out my pentagram for mayhem.
You are possessed.
This is a mayhem.
I love it.
Jacket.
Pentagram. Actually, it's a pentacle. You know why it's a pentacle instead of a pentagram?
A Pentecostal.
But you know why it's a pentacle instead of a pentagram? Because if it's in a circle, it's a pentacle.
Oh.
Yeah. You should know that stuff. See, I'm not as well read as you, but guess what? I know stuff you don't. So.
Oh, well, maybe we should do your tarot cards. That would be the thing. I'm taking a deep breath because it's all of you I want to speak to. Extinction 2112 seems to be coming quicker and quicker. We have the Ukrainians at the border flying to Mexico to get across the border and being given a pass through, which is good, but not the Hondurans or the Cameroonians or me. I don't think I should go to the border. I'm not sure they'd let me back. And my friend Brian, who almost made 3 mistakes. He made a big one and a medium-sized mistake and a little mistake. If he'd made 2 big ones,
I'd be gone.
He'd be gone. He'd be gone, and I'd be helping him think about how he's going to support 3 kids on his skills. He could go back into vendables.
God, oh my God.
He used to be a vendable deliverable.
I was a deliverable.
He was a deliverable, and he used to complain non-stop about vendables, where I thought vendables was just the right place for him.
Shut up.
I thought that was the height of what he was capable of, but he is now a used car salesman.
Yes.
So he's gone even higher than I had allocated for him. And I'm going to go up there and buy a car to burnish his reputation and then return it the next day.
You can't return cars.
Oh, that's a lie. I will talk them. I'll sweet talk them into taking it back. I'm going to take another deep breath now. I really want to talk about enoughness.
Okay.
Enoughness really starts at the funny story. Because if you can't make it a funny story, what we're experiencing now, here, on this very day, just a couple of days after the Boston Marathon. And you know what happened with the Boston Marathon some years ago, not that many years ago. There was an explosion at the finish line. I take another deep breath just to remind myself death can come at the finish line or before. Some people don't like my poetry.
No, this is not very encouraging.
Not very encouraging. Well, I'm going to come up and buy a used car from you, and then you'll be encouraged to take what I say seriously. Oh, death, here I come. I am the one we await. I have discovered myself amongst the very elite. You can send me your contribution, because in my herbal administration, we're going to change the Trump time tone and timbre. It's going to be different when I'm president. Herbie for president. I'm taking a deep breath. It's good not to be in jail.
Yep.
It's good not to be in jail, and for the junta not to be here. It's all coming. We're all going back to the joint. It's a juke joint where we get our shit and shinola. Shit happens. You can't make it up. You can't make shit up. And you can't do it all. You practice intention and intuition. You improvise your inspirations. And if you're lucky, revelatory, orgasmic, origami reality treats you right.
What if you're unlucky?
If you're unlucky, you get to sit out here with my used car salesman who may be on the very brink of vendables. Once again, his vagina monologue is a vendable and a Venn diagram and vertigo.
Okay.
Vertigo and the mainstream Mayan migraine mayhem. That's what we're going to listen to. If you were having a headache, would you want to go listen to death metal? That's all I want you to know. The death metal is what those people with migraines in the mainstream, once they've gone through their malware and their malevolence, they come out to mayhem.
I think Malevolence is the name of another band, actually.
Malevolence.
It's true, actually.
We'll call it, my band, I'm going to call Maha Malevolence.
In fact, you're going to like this. One of the most popular death metal or extreme metal bands out there is called Meshuggah.
You kidding?
Nope.
Meshuggah.
They are very popular, been so for many, many years.
Wow.
Yep.
Meshuggah and Mayhem on the same bill?
They could easily be on the same bill. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Cool. Did I ever tell you that when I lived in England, I lived with the Sex Pistols road manager, Barbara.
What?
Yeah, the Sex Pistols road manager. And I once met Sid Vicious.
Really? What was he like?
He came over.
What was he like?
He didn't say anything to me. He acted like I wasn't there.
What an asshole.
They had just released Nevermind the Bollocks.
Yeah.
And and Johnny Rotten was like a big deal back then. And so they just came and they were going on some kind of tour. She got to be their road manager because she had like an RV.
Because she happened to have something for them to travel in?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then they came over to East
Wembley.
India.
We lived in Wembley at the time in a squat.
And what's a squat?
A squat is where there was a law passed in 1330 or something when the Black Plague happened. That because so many people died, that if a house was empty and no one was there, you could go live in it.
This sounds like a law tailor-made for you.
It was tailor-made for it was yeah. And so when I came to England, I went to go to the Alexander Technique School, but I didn't have any place to live, so I just arrived, and I didn't really know anybody except
You took the phrase "be here now" too literally.
Too literally, I did, and I had someone, a friend. Whose friend was it? It was a friend of someone's who they knew, who. And they told me to see these people. So I went to see these people, and these people didn't want to put me up. So they,
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
So they took me to Doynton Street.
Yeah.
I still remember Doynton Street, to these people who were living in a squat. And they knew someone who lived at the squat who was like traveling.
Okay.
And so I could stay there temporarily.
Okay.
So I stayed there for the first month and a half or something.
And the people that were traveling were Barbara and Sid Vicious?
No. No, they were later.
Oh, okay.
But when I first arrived,
All right.
no, when I first arrived, there were these other people. Joynton Street, I remember, which was Archway, near Archway.
Mm-hmm.
And these people were friendly enough. They were kind of nice, but this other person was coming back, and indeed, after a month and a half, they did come back.
Mm-hmm.
But once they came back, that was the point at which, what did I do? Then there was another squat in Kilburn
Mm-hmm.
that I could stay at. By that time I had met these people, Michael and Carol,
Mm-hmm.
and they lived in Hampstead, but they knew some people who lived in Kilburn,
Mm-hmm.
and this was a big squat, and Barbara lived in that squat.
And that's how you met Barbara.
That's how I met Barbara. But this squat, I think, what happened? From that squat, see, there was a lot of negotiations with the various councils, because
Okay.
they were like these were abandoned places that were owned by the council. And so they wanted to get us out of this squat. So they somehow arranged with Wembley. So we got this other like big house.
Yeah.
And I think it was Barbara who actually did all the negotiating for that.
Nice.
And so this big house had like parking. She could put, because you can't just put an RV on the street.
Yeah.
So it had like this big like drive, this big circular drive,
Mm-hmm.
like one of those suburban homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so she could have her RV there, and there were a bunch of people from the Kilburn who came to Wembley,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to get in, and then there were a couple other people who I think Barbara chose.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of.
It sounds like she could have started a cult if she wanted to.
Well, it was kind of a weird thing, because she also, at the time, I was like selling American used clothes.
Yep.
And I remember there were people she invited in, these punk people who had no place to live.
Yep.
And there were in one room, there were about like 6 of them stayed there. And they would steal stuff from me when I was out. They would steal this American stuff from me. So one time when they were out, I took all their punk records. And they had like original like Sex Pistol stuff.
Yeah.
And all kinds of like, it was like really funky, these releases and the EPs. I think I had a lot of valuable stuff.
And you stole it back.
So I stole, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you give me my stuff and I'll give you your stuff.
How'd that work out?
That didn't work out.
What happened?
Well, actually, something happened where, what happened at that point? At that point, this was like a year later. At that point, I was going to the Alexander School to study the Alexander technique, and I was also selling stuff on Portobello Road. And it just so happened that some of these people moved onto Portobello Road, and I knew someone who also lived in that house, and they invited me over, and I saw some of my Hawaiian shirts. So I actually stole back a lot of my stuff from them, and the stuff that I couldn't get back, there were on Portobello Road where I sold secondhand American stuff. Across from me were two guys who like sold like EPs and they sold 45s and not 45s, 33s, and so they picked through all the stuff that I had taken from these punk rockers, and they.
You could also just call them punks because they stole your stuff.
Yeah, they were punks, and so they took all that stuff, and I kept that stuff for years. I had it for years, yeah. At that point, I found another place to live. I had. By the time I was there a year, I had a place to live, and that was like when on Portobello Road selling American like secondhand stuff. Was
the business doing well, or?
The business, I was like making a wounding. I wasn't quite a killing, but I was making like $500 a week.
Well, so what year was this?
This was like 1975, 76.
So that was enough to keep you going.
$500 was well more than enough.
Wow, that's
to keep
good.
Me going. Yeah, no, and it got better and better. At one point, at the beginning, the pound went up to $2.40. So I was buying like used baseball jackets. Remember your high school baseball jacket, leather jackets?
Yeah.
I was buying those for like, at the beginning I was buying them for like $2 and $3 a piece.
Yeah.
And I could sell them for 10 pounds. 10 pounds was like $24. And so it was
magical.
It was amazing. It was amazing for about 2 or 3 years.
What happened?
Well, for one thing, the pound went from $2.40 for being, it was like $1 worth, or 1 pound was worth $2.40, to where the pound and the dollar became equivalent. The pound went down. So that was one thing. The other thing was that a lot of people got in. I was making like, $3 selling for $24. There were suddenly people on, where was it? It was in some of the fancy shops on the King's Road.
Yeah.
They were selling American stuff. And what they did was that the leather jackets I was getting, the authentic stuff, they were doing knockoffs. They were buying new stuff. So I lost a lot of business to people who didn't really. There were some people who wanted the authentic stuff, but there were a lot of people who just wanted something Americano, and those people paid more money, and were getting less from me, and so it became more. It was still a good business because I could sell a lot. I sold suede jackets and leather jackets from the 50s and 60s. I was selling, one of the big things that I could sell, I could go around here and pay like $35 for a bomber jacket, leather bomber jackets, and I could take them to London and sell them for $60, $70, $80, depending. There were collectors I had that were looking for like Second World War. They were looking for A1s and A2. They were looking for very specific labels and stuff. And so when I found those kinds of things, I could get big money for them.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I was still making money, although not quite as much as at the beginning. But it was a good business for like 10 or 15 years.
No shit. Good for you.
So, and I saved some money, and unfortunately I invested in an antique store with Brian Mays, and he had an antique store, and there was this other woman, Mary, what was Mary's last name? But I went into business with this antiques dealer, and I got screwed. I lost basically all the money. What happened was, at Portobello Road, there was a guy who, at some points you go and you need to take a piss or get something to eat or something. One time, and I would go and I would also dance on the streets with some of the street musicians.
I would have loved to have seen that.
And it was fun. It was really a lot of fun. But one time I came back, and this guy who bought some things from me, he was standing there and he was looking after my stuff. Mark Herbie. He was a really, really nice guy, really honest, and he started to work for me so that I could, and there were times, because I used to have to come back and buy my stuff here, and I used to come back like 3 times a year. So for a month, like, he would take over, and he was really honest. And
but then what happened?
Well, but he was an architecture student.
Yeah.
And if I thought, and I never thought, I could have bought a house there, because I was an American, but he was English. If we'd bought a house together or something, I'd be rolling in dough today, because it's just like living in Cambridge.
Yeah.
Just like when I lived in Cambridge before that, there was a time when I could have bought a house, a 3-family on Cherry Street for $12,500. And I was going to go in. I was going to buy it. I was still living in England, but this was like a deal.
Yeah.
This was like a kind of a friend of mine who owned the building, and he wanted to get rid of it. But I didn't want to buy it all by myself, and I had, at the time, one of my best friends, Ben Levine, was going to buy it with me, but we sort of dawdled a little bit, and he finally...
Do dawdlers win? Dawdlers don't win.
Dawdlers don't win, and dawdlerers don't win either. And so he wound up selling it to someone who lived on the 3rd floor there.
That sucks.
But I wouldn't live in elder housing today if I'd bought that. I'd probably have millions of dollars. Just that one building. You can't buy a single house in Cambridge for under $1 million. There's nothing.
But if you weren't like struggling to find, if you weren't like housing insecure for many years, we wouldn't have met, probably,
Absolutely true. My whole life would be different and better. Better.
You probably wouldn't have had a radio.
You wouldn't have had
a radio show. We wouldn't have met.
Wouldn't have met Wyoma.
You would have just been sitting there and drinking your Keurig coffee, whining and dining all your friends.
It wouldn't have been Keurig coffee, because I used to have like that coffee substitute stuff. What was that called?
Postum?
No, it was like Postum, but it was more organic than that.
Hey, have you ever
Wyoma?
Have you ever tried the Civet coffee?
Civet?
Yeah, no. Civet. The Civet Cats, you know about that? It's like the world's most expensive coffee.
No.
The Civet Cat is like a wild cat. And
I know what a civet cat is.
They
have like an aphrodisiac, don't they?
Well, they eat the coffee beans and then they poop them out, and people harvest those beans that they get pooped out and pay ridiculous amounts of money for the coffee beans. Yes, not joking at all.
Have you ever tasted it?
No, I was gonna buy some off Amazon, but it was like just like $100 for a little tin.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Wow. $100? Wow, I got into the wrong business.
Should have been breeding civets.
Breeding civets. Huh.
I guess I could just start feeding some to my cat and see if I can start selling that.
Yes. That'd be good.
All right, let's wrap up these thoughts here.
Okay.
Before
a deep breath.
You blow everyone away.
You circle around the stupa clockwise, above and beyond the call of duty and booty. Oh.